My name is Gladys. I'm 69 years old, Ryan, and after a lifetime of caring for others, I finally done something just for myself. Me. Have you ever felt like you've spent your life serving? And when you finally wanted some peace, has someone shown up to take it from you? Well, phew, that's exactly what happened to me. For 44 years, I worked as a librarian in Burlington, Vermont. Yay, I'd sit on out to children. Every coin that was left, I kept in an envelope. George, my late husband, always dreamed of a house in the countryside. My where we could grow old, listening to the sound of the wind and not the noise of traffic. He left before I saw the dream come to pass, but I promised myself that one day I would make it happen for both of us. 2 years after my widowhood, I kept my promise. With my savings, I bought a little house in Woodstock, surrounded by maple trees and with a porch that looked like it was made for my old rocking chair. That morning, now, as I put my books on the shelf and smelled new wood, I thought, no. Anyway, Gladys, you have a place of your own. Little did I know that this piece would have a scheduled time to end. And it was the phone that rang that changed everything. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. When a silent mother decides to react, it's not out of anger, it's out of self-love. I was still unpacking the last boxes, arranging the cutlery in the cupboard, when the phone rang. It was Melissa, my daughter, Agnes, in the same firm voice as always. She said, Mom, in an hour we're there. Arriving with 20 people from Jack's family. Prepare the food and tidy up the rooms. That went through me like a blade. No one asked if I could. Nobody wanted to know if I wanted to. They just came with suitcases, hungry, with expectations. And me? I only had my newfound peace and a handful of silence stored in my chest. But it was there, at that exact minute, that I started planning. If you've ever felt like you're only remembered when you need to, if it has already been treated as an obligation and not as a person. So maybe this story is also a little bit yours. If so, I invite you to stay with me until the end. Give me your company in this outburst. Enjoy the video. Subscribe here to the channel. Why? Because telling yourself this is like opening an old wound, and we only do that when we feel that there's someone real listening on the other side. I've spent my whole life doing math, always having less than I needed, but saving the little I gave. $5 here, 10 there, hidden inside the books on the living room shelf. Sometimes in the middle of an old Bible, sometimes between yellowed pages of novels that no one else picked up. It is my way of dreaming without making noise. George knew. He laughed when he saw me putting another envelope in the middle of the pages of Wuthering Heights. This house will be ours, Gladys, even if it takes 20 years. It took 42. When he left, the world was mute. I kept going to the library every day, smiling at the students, lending books. Wow. But inside, I was in gray. No, it wasn't until I decided to take the envelopes off the shelf, one by one, tie, and counted exactly $5,000. That something rekindled inside me. I called a broker in the Woodstock area. He said he wanted a small, old place with a balcony and silence. He pointed me to a house that an elderly couple, the Wallace, were leaving to move to Florida. Well, I went there. I entered slowly. Oh, the floor creaked. The smell was of wood and history. At the bottom of the land, wow, a hill. You could imagine autumn painting everything orange. I signed the papers with trembling hands. I didn't call anyone to see. Neither Melissa nor my grandchildren knew. It was an achievement of my own, and I wanted to live it in its entirety. I remember the first day well. I took only a suitcase, a bag with Georges books, and a kettle. I stopped on the porch, laid a gâteau. It's tiny when you put my old rocking chair in the right corner. As he said, it was the best side to watch the sunset. I sat down, closed my eyes, and thought. Gladys, you've arrived. The house was small, like Kenny, but welcoming. A kitchen with low cabinets, the way I reach without climbing on a chair. An old wood stove that still worked. A renovated attic with a small window that overlooked the trees. In the bedroom, only my bed, my light blue bedspread, and a lamp that flashes if you move the cord. No, but it was all mine. For the first time, mine. Melissa thought I was going senile. She never said it in full letters, but blurted out, and you're saying Shisha, London now. It's the number door up prayers. Mom, what are you going to do alone in the middle of the woods? It's a waste of money. Well, and I answered with a small smile. It's not bush. Daughter, I'll little. I attempt to say to disease so the wakakapa. No, not I didn't. It's rest. She never understood. He didn't even try. For days, I was arranging things little by little. The radio played songs from the 60s while I hung flowery curtains. The afternoons were long and slow. I even danced in the kitchen alone. Well, imagining George laughing at my lack of rhythm. Not how. It was as if time had given me back my hand. But peace is a skittish animal. All it takes is one wrong sound, and she runs away. And that's exactly what happened. I was placing the last few dishes in the cabinet when I heard the phone vibrate on the table. I looked at the screen. Melissa. Well, then you're talking Pycon. The hand froze. My chest was tight, but I complied. She didn't even say hi. Mom, in an hour we will be there. I'm arriving with 20 people from Jack's family. War zone. Prepare food and the rooms. 20. I repeated silently. What? 20. I remember looking at my house, listen calm, and to have felt it shrink. The small table, narrative formed, attention and shout. How thankful The old sofa, down. The pillows still packed. I didn't even have enough towels. She hung up before I could say anything. It was as if I were an employee, as if the house were public, as if my rest was disposable. I stopped for a moment, with my hand on the plate, and felt a mixture of sadness and anger that I can't explain. And here I need to take a break, because maybe you've felt that too. That feeling that when you finally choose yourself, someone shows up to remind you that you can't, that you have to keep serving, smiling, nah, giving in. If this has ever happened to you, if at any time in your life someone has treated your peace as their obligation, comments below. He writes, I believe I've lived it, or it touched me, just so I know that I'm not alone in this feeling. Because look, hurt, I stood there, no, holding that plate for long minutes. And it was then that something inside me changed place, as if, at that moment, a Gladys I didn't know had woken up. Ah, and it was no longer made only of sweetness. But did I have the courage to face them when they arrived? Or did I keep silent once again, like so many others? Oh, if you knew what happened that night. But this, I'll tell you right away. When I hung up the phone, the first thing I did was sit down. I felt my legs weaken, as if my whole body had emptied inside. The kitchen seemed to spin. The kettle sizzled on the stove. One. But the noise disappeared. All that was left was Melissa's voice echoing in my head. I'm arriving at 20th. 20. And it was not an exaggeration. Jack, her husband, was with their 2 children, my grandchildren, who almost never call me, Jack's parents, who shake my head as if I were a piece of furniture, 2 uncles, 3 cousins, and some friends from the Baptist church who, according to her, were in need of a vacation. Why, as if I were a country hotel, as if this house belonged to everyone, as if I hadn't just arrived, as if I had no right to breathe. I got up slowly and looked around. The box of cutlery still open, the dish towels unfolded, the room smelling of fresh paint. My house was still under construction. In the deepest sense of the word, I hadn't even had time to belong to it yet, and they were already coming to take me out. I picked up the phone again. I thought about calling and saying that I couldn't, that the house was small, that I barely had towels, that the stove was still being calibrated. But before I even typed in the number, I remembered what it looks like, of how she always was. Since she was little, Melissa has always had this tough way. That voice that doesn't ask, that it requires, and me, always disguising it, always saying, yes. I sat down again. One choked down. In his head, wow. Another memory arose. The day of Georgie's burial. She arrived late, in heels, wearing sunglasses, already asking who was going to take the car. Then he called me aside and said, if you need help, dividing Dad's things. I can take whatever is most difficult. She didn't want to help. I wanted to take it. She took his old watches and the blue wool coat he wore on Sundays. He said he would keep it as a souvenir. I never saw it again. I knew she would come, and I knew that it would come with the hunger of those who do not recognize the value of things, nor of the people. What hurt me was not that she came. It was for her to come like this, with this certainty that I could. With this certainty that it was my obligation to receive them, with this tone of command. Prepare food. Tidy up the rooms. I had experienced this so many times. The difference is that now the house was mine, only mine, and yet, even so, I felt like I was occupying a space that they wouldn't let me have. I went to the fridge. 2 eggs, 1 liter of milk, a half-finished packet of rice. I hadn't made any big purchases yet. I was still getting ready. The stove, as I said, was old. I didn't even test the oven. The mattresses. I only had one. Besides my bed, not silken down, or no back she said, and it was thin. Now, in the basement. I used it when I painted the room. I looked at the clock. There were 45 minutes left. Part of me wanted to run away. Part wanted to lock the door. But another part, quieter, more wounded, just stood still, looking at the new tablecloth I had put on that morning. The yellow flowers seemed to laugh at me. I sat down again. I thought of George. He would say, "Gladys, you need to stand up." But he knew that my voice had always been low, and tongue. I didn't scream. He didn't hit his hand on the table. I served. I always did. That was my role. But did it still need to be? This question burned me inside. For the first time, I wanted to say no, but could I do it? They were on their way. The dust on the road must have been kicking up by now. And I, there, sitting, with the cutlery to put away, and the heart beating as if it were trying to escape from the chest. But what did I do when they arrived? This part. You need to listen carefully, because it was there that something inside me turned inside out. No, God. As time passed, and their arrival approached, I stood there in the kitchen, but it was as if I was very far away. The sound of the wind hitting the windows mixed with voices from the past, and suddenly, everything I tried to sweep under the rug of memory came back with force. I remembered the nights when I cooked with a fever just to get dinner ready when Melissa got home from college. She would sit at the table, eat in silence, and leave before I finished asking how the day had been. I remembered the times when she would borrow money, and I, even counting coins to pay for gas, would hand it over. "Mom, it's only until the end of the month." But he never came back. Neither the money, nor the consideration. And I didn't charge, because a mother's love. I was taught, no one has no receipt. There was a Christmas when I prepared everything myself. I put the lights on the porch, made pumpkin pie, arranged the tree, left the gifts wrapped with gold ribbon. They said they would come around 5. Mom, I was ready from 2. I lit the fireplace, left the table set, put on the green dress that George loved. 5 hours. 6, 7, they seemed our shores. Nod, what hard. Nothing. At 8, I received a message. Oh, Jack's car had a problem. We won't be able to go. It was Christmas Eve. I had dinner alone. Nice. And I cried in silence, with the television on so no one could hear. That day, Anasio, I realized something that hurt me more than the absence. It was not a priority in their lives. I was an option, a convenient option, which they used when they needed it and ignored it when they didn't. And there was that episode with Georgie's books. Our bookcase was the heart of the house. Each book had a story of ours. He loved to reread the classics. After he left, Melissa came here saying she was going to help with the tidying up. She took half the books, filled 2 boxes, and said, "Wow, nobody reads this. Mom, I'm going to donate." I asked her to wait. No, because I wanted to see each one before. She said she was just trying to ease my emotional mess. That broke something inside me, and even so, I kept silent. I have always kept silent. I was a good mother. I gave everything, every part of me, every penny, every tear, every morning. And now, at 69, after a lifetime of giving to me, my daughter thought it was normal to let me know that she was arriving with 20 people, without asking, without respect, as if my house, my food, my life, were an extension of her will. I looked out the window. Outside, the leaves were beginning to fall from the trees. Autumn was about to arrive. And maybe with him, the last version of me that still accepted everything quietly. Because at that moment, there alone in the kitchen, I thought a phrase that I had never dared to think about before. I was mother enough for everyone, but no one was a child to me. Wow. And that's when we think about it, that something really changes. But would I have the courage to act differently this time? Could I choose myself, even if it meant disappointing those who have always taken advantage of my kindness? The answer would come faster than I imagined. And what happened in the following hours? Not even I could have predicted it. I opened the fridge with a lump in my throat. 2 eggs, a liter of milk expiring the next day, a half-finished packet of rice. It was all I had there. My idea was to shop calmly in the next few days, get to know the markets in the city, see which one had the sweetest apples, which one sold fresh bread. But now they were coming, 20 people, and me, with a kitchen that could barely handle me. I thought about going to the market, picking up something, improvising. But before leaving, I went to check the account balance. $293. That was all that was left until the next insurance deposit. If I spent now, Odeon, Watry, I would have no margin for anything. What if they stayed more than a day? What if more appeared? They always show up. I leaned against the bench and closed my eyes. It wasn't just about food. It was about invasion. My home, my, my refuge. This long-dreamed space, suddenly, it no longer felt mine. The small kitchen, which had previously enchanted me, now seemed cramped. The room, which I had barely warmed with my perfume, would be occupied by other voices, other bodies. Every corner seemed to be taken before it was even lived by me. I walked slowly around the house. I ran my hand over the door frame, the back of my rocking chair. There's so I tried what he said, Hannah. The books I had just put on the shelf. I found myself saying goodbye in silence, as if I knew I was about to lose that. Every step hurt, as if they were pulling out, with tweezers, the few threads of joy that had begun to grow inside me. I went up to the attic, the open window, let the cold wind in. I sat there for a few minutes, looking at the field outside. The trees were beginning to brown. Oh, the leaves swayed as if they were trying to warn me of something. Autumn has always been my favorite season. That's when everything seems to die on the outside. But, in fact, it is just getting ready to start over. It was at that moment that I felt it. A shiver, now, a nuisance, a warning, as if the camp itself was trying to tell me, no one wanted, and he said, don't call me. They're going to take everything. And for the first time, and I listened. Now, I went back downstairs. I stopped in the center of the room. I looked around. I took a deep breath, and I realized something that gave me goosebumps from head to toe. I didn't want them to come. Not at all. I wasn't happy. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't excited to see my daughter. Well, that's it. It broke me inside. Why? Because a mother who is a mother should want the presence of her children, right? He should rejoice, open his arms, smile, but I didn't. I wanted to be alone, and that thought, which one day would have filled me with guilt, at that moment filled me with strength. I'm here, opening my heart, telling my story. If you're listening, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you. Sometimes, sharing the pain with those who understand relieves the burden a little. I took an old notebook that was in my bag, sat at the table and started to scribble some ideas. It wasn't a plan yet. It was another muffled scream on paper. I wrote what I wanted to say to them. I wrote how I felt. I wrote what I feared. Alone. And there, between one line and another, now, I realized I was no longer willing to be the woman who lowers her head. I got up slowly, went to the balcony door and opened it. The wind came in with force, messing up my thin hair, lifting the kitchen cloths, but I didn't close it. No, I stayed there, now, firm knee. The field in front of me, now, with its silent immensity, seemed to stare back at me. How? It was as if to say, You can still choose. And I wanted to believe so. I wanted to believe that there was still time to protect what was mine. But how to impose limits without losing my daughter once and for all? How do I protect my home without looking like a bitter old woman? How to make me respect it without screaming? Maybe I already knew the answer. Maybe it was already forming inside, deep in my silence. But you need to know what happened when they arrived. Wow. Because what came next, it was the beginning of something that even I didn't imagine I would be able to do. The sound of the tires on the gravel at the entrance was like thunder that cut my breath away. 3 SUVs, all dark, huge, squeezing into my little gravel driveway. No, before I could get up from my chair on the porch, the doors were already opening. Children jumped as if they were arriving at an amusement park. They ran through the beds that I had not even finished planting. One of the boys kicked a vase of lavender I had brought from Burlington. It fell and broke. No one saw it, or pretended not to see. The adults came right behind, laughing loudly, talking all at the same time, carrying plastic bags, soda cans, rolling suitcases, and colorful pillows. It was a parade of noise and haste, and no one, absolutely no one, knocked on the door. They just walked in, as if I were the cleaning lady, as if it were all theirs. Jack walked past me, patted me on the back, that way he has of treating any woman like a waitress. It's going to be for everyone. Mother-in-law, relax. Well, settle down. And he entered, already taking off his shoes, throwing it to any corner. Melissa came right behind, cell phone in hand. Pass, with the practical expression of someone who always decides for everyone. The baby cries at night, so we're going to stay in the master bedroom. I need you to leave us some clean towels and, if you have one, a fan. Oh, and don't forget, the sofa in the living room is good for you. Right, Mom. And before I could answer, she was already walking up the stairs with the baby on her lap and the suitcase dragging the steps. I stood in the middle of the house, watching it all happen as if watching the dismantling of a castle made of cards. One by one, the rooms were occupied. The dominated. Messed up. Tote bags on the kitchen counter. A backpack thrown over my favorite armchair. The radio turned off. The books piled up anyway. I went to the kitchen, turned on the stove. I put a pot of water without even knowing what I was going to cook. My body moved automatically, but inside I wasn't there. They asked me for plates, cutlery, now, napkins. Gladys, where are the bigger pots? Shouted someone in the room. Another asked where the blankets were, and I nodded gently. I was showing everything, taking it all, as I always did, as if my name was still available. I went to the laundry room, took towels, folded pillows, put sheets on top of the sofa, the same sofa where That first night, I dreamed that I was going to have peace. Now it would be my bed, while Melissa slept with the baby in my room, on my mattress, on my light blue bedspread that still kept the smell of the fabric softener I used just for myself. No one thanked him. Not a look of gratitude. Not a gesture of recognition. Only the noise of other people's conversations. Loud laughter. Nice. The television turned on at a volume that covered the sound of the wind. I walked to the back of the house and stopped in front of the bathroom mirror. I looked at myself for a few seconds. I didn't recognize myself. I was a shadow of the woman who signed that contract weeks ago. My hands trembling with emotion. That woman had hope. That woman believed she could start over. What now? Now she wore an apron, swept crumbs of chips off the floor, and had to wait for her daughter to get out of the shower so she could brush her teeth. The humiliation did not come from screaming. It came from gestures. The way they ignored me. How they took the space. How they pushed me once again. Oh, to the edge of my own life. In the living room. But on lockdown. I didn't just look out at you. The children screamed. Threw cushions. Jumped on the sofa. Adults laughed at something on their cell phones. And I, leaning against the door frame, looked at that scenery and felt as if everything was covered in fine dust. Invisible. I went I. But it suffocated. And then we called matters. I kept quiet. Once again. But this time, my silence was not surrender. It was a wait, because something inside me was getting ready. And you need to see what started to be born that night. While everyone was laughing, and I watched. The house was plunged into stuffy chaos. Each room had a strange breath, a snoring, a child's cry. I curled up on the couch as best I could, with the blanket I found in the back of the closet. It was thin and rough. The backrest cushion didn't fit my neck. The television in the living room had been left on at low volume. Playing some program, I didn't find the control. I was only able to lower it a little with my fingers on the side buttons. I tried to close my eyes. I tried to imagine that I was somewhere else. But the crack of the fridge opening, the footsteps in the kitchen, someone opening a can of soda in the middle of the night, everything pulled me back to reality. It wasn't my home. Not that night. It was a passing station. And I was responsible for the order, the food, and the silence. That silence that is only expected of us, never of them. The children slept on the living room floor, spread out on mats. One of them kicked the sofa while she moved in her sleep. Another mumbled things in a nightmare. From the upstairs room came Jack's deep snoring, cutting through the night like a saw. Melissa complained about the baby, and her mother-in-law coughed as if she were going to cough her lungs out. And me, there, bounding, in the middle of everything, invisible. Wow. The ceiling was the same one I had looked at with hope on the first day. Now, he seemed more distant, cold, as if he had moved away from me, along with everything I thought I had built. I got up slowly, went to the bookshelf, and took George's picture frame. I went back to the couch, hugged the picture on my chest, and stared at the photo as if looking for breath. The image of him smiling with the straw hat he wore on Sundays hit me like a punch in the chest. I whispered softly, with my throat tightened, "Liua, George, how long will I be invisible?" At that moment, I felt the tears flow. They didn't come with noise. They came like a fine rain, the kind that soaks everything without making a fuss. The blanket became damp, my chest even more so. Why, Kai, man did young, and I understood. It wasn't about the missing eggs, nor about the bed, nor about the full house. It was about what they took from me without asking. Respect, dignity, I am your coral now, town. The choice that night was long. I didn't sleep. I just stood there, motionless, feeling everything hurt in a way that only silent mothers know. And it was in this immobility that something inside me, broke. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hate. It was exhaustion. Tired of being everyone's support, while no one saw my tiredness. It was at that moment that something whispered in me. Enough, not out loud. Not yet, but it was the first time I heard this word inside me so clearly. And look at it. If you have come this far, listening to my outburst, stay with me until the end. Because what comes after that night changes everything. I promise. Because that morning, with open eyes and a sore heart, I made a promise. I still didn't know how or with whom, but something was going to change the next day. And the first change, it started with a silence. But did I have the courage to break the cycle? Or did I bend over again at breakfast? You will understand why that morning was different from all the others I have experienced. The sky was still dark when I got up. 5 in the morning, the whole house slept, or at least pretended to sleep. You could still hear Jack snoring mixed with the slight hum of the refrigerator. I got up from the couch slowly, my body aching, and my soul even more so. I went to the bathroom, washed my face with cold water, and stared at myself in the mirror, still with swollen eyes, still with unkempt hair, but for the first time, with a firmness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in decades. I went down to the kitchen, and, unlike all the other days of my life, no, I didn't worry about what they would want. And they don't lust, they don't eat. I took my blue cup, put water to boil and prepared coffee, just for me, without thinking about multiplying, without looking for extra sugar, without a tray full of bread. Just my coffee. That moment was mine. I sat on the porch, still with the early morning air wrapping around my shoulders, and drank slowly. Each sip was like a small victory, a reminder that I existed, that I could, and it was there. Why? watching the field wake up in silence. That I knew what I knew. It had begun. The noise on the stairs came at 6 something. Hurried steps. Melissa entered the kitchen with a sleepy face, the baby on her lap, and the cell phone in her hand. "Is the coffee ready?" he asked, without even looking in my direction. I looked up slowly and said, "I made it for myself." She stopped. The phrase seemed to have hit the kitchen floor. She stood, staring at the empty coffee pot as if she herself had been forgotten. "Ah, okay," he mumbled, and he left. I stayed there. I didn't apologize. I didn't rush to prepare another bottle. I just kept drinking my coffee, cup in my hands, feeling its warmth warmer than my fingers, warming my courage. Throughout the day, the small changes continued. They came to ask for help with the baby's diapers. "Can you get it upstairs for me?" "Mom, I can't." "Is that it?" No explanation? Without remorse. "Gladys, there are clothes in the machine. Can you extend?" "It's not mine." "Can you prepare some sandwiches for us to take to the lake?" "I'm not going to the lake." It was like laying brick by brick on an invisible wall. A wall that didn't kick them out, but that protected me. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for saying no. I felt relief. And at that moment, I need to pause and ask, have you ever felt that too? That relief of, after years of canceling yourself, saying a simple no and feeling that it gave you back the air? Because if you've ever felt, comment here. He writes, "I know how it is," or "I understand you," or even just "it's true." Because, look, sometimes we just need to hear that we are not the only one who is tired of being the last option of ourselves. In the late afternoon, where happens my style, while everyone was at the lake, I grabbed the car key. I didn't say anything. I didn't leave a message. I just grabbed my bag, walked out the back door, and drove. But I didn't go to the market. And where I've been, it will surprise you, because it wasn't just one place. It was a starting point. And that's when things really start to change. I drove to Rutland with my hands firmly on the wheel, my heart beating louder than the tires on the asphalt. The road was lined with trees, and the wind made the leaves dance as if celebrating a change. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lost. I had a destiny. The city center was small, with old shops and wooden signs in the windows. I stopped the car in front of a red brick building with a frosted glass door that read, "Ellison and Clark, Family Law and Property." I took a deep breath, adjusted the scarf around my neck, and entered. The smell of coffee mixed with old paper greeted me like a hug. The secretary, a small girl with attentive eyes, offered me water and asked me to wait. Shortly after, I was called Lianis. Mr. Powell. Ellison was a middle-aged man, a neatly trimmed gray beard, glasses hanging around his neck. And what else? He greeted me with respect, pulled up his chair, and said, Make yourself comfortable. Mrs. Gladys, what can I do for you?" It took me a few seconds to start, but when I opened my mouth, The story came out like a river breaking a dam. I told him everything, from the purchase of the house to Melissa's call to the details of the silent invasion. Wow, the 20 guests, the constant requests, the disrespect, the feeling of erasure. I talked about the sleepless nights, the no's I started to say, and the fear of seeming ungrateful for wanting only peace. Mr. Ellison listened in silence, taking notes. When I finished, he took off his glasses, leaned back in his chair, and said calmly, "What you are describing has a name, and it's not just family disrespect. This is emotional abuse, and financial abuse too." I stood still. That word, abuse, felt like a mirror breaking. I had never thought like that. I always thought it was just a family thing, that a mother should put up with it, that a daughter had the right to make mistakes. But at that moment, I understood nothing. What I was experiencing was not normal. It never was. He continued, patiently explaining everything to me. He said I had the right to protect my home. Who, as an owner, could establish clear rules. He talked about temporary accommodation contracts, domestic fees, extrajudicial notifications, and even property infringement lawsuits. They may be your family, Gladys, but that doesn't mean they can invade you emotionally. Not even financially. I listened to each word as if I were hearing music for the first time. A song that talked about autonomy, respect, limits. He handed me a folder with contract templates, forms, and a pamphlet with the rights of the elderly in situations of silent abuse. He said he would call me in the next few days to find out how he preferred to proceed. I left the office with my briefcase pressed to my chest. The wind from the street seemed lighter. The sky was blue, but my soul was on fire. It was as if, suddenly, I had the reins of life back in my hands. I got in the car, took a deep breath and stood there for a moment. Me, Gladys, the woman who said yes to everything and everyone. I was about to do something that no one expected. Return home with a plan. And it was not a revenge plan. It was a plan of justice. Because there are times in life when we stop asking for permission, and he begins to close the door with his own key. But what I found when I returned home, no lawyer could have foreseen that. Because sometimes life decides to test you until the last second. And it was there that everything turned around for good. The road back home seemed shorter. Not because time passed quickly, but because my heart came back different. As I drove, with the briefcase in the passenger seat, I mentally repeated every word Mr. Ellison said to me. How? This has a name. Emotional abuse. It kept echoing like a bell that no one else heard. Only me. For the first time, I realized that I could own my story and not just the accounts and care. I parked the car in silence. It's already night. The house had all the lights on, as if it were a boarding house in the middle of summer. Upon entering, the smell of frying and soda mixed with disorganization greeted me like a warm slap. On the couch, the same one ID slept on the night before, Jack was lying on his back, his belly up, and the remote control lying on the floor. On television, how? A cartoon played with the volume turned up, and two children disputed who could scream the loudest because of the video game. I stepped carefully. I didn't want to warn anyone of my arrival. In the kitchen, I left the grocery bag on the countertop. A packet of rice, half a kilo of beans, a whole wheat bread, and a carton of milk. Nothing more. Naomi chilled. How did you buy? See the light in it yourself. There was no meat. There was no juice. No fruit. No cookies. No beer. In the other hand, didn't I? I held the blue folder with the printed documents. I went straight to the back room, what they call the tool room, but where I kept my printer, my papers, and some of my sanity. I sat there, closed the door slowly, and started printing the contracts. One for each adult in the house. Term of temporary permanence on private property. Each leaf was like a step, and I went up, alone, but standing. How? The next day, how? I woke up before everyone else again. I put the coffee water to boil and made it just for me. Like the day before, as I took my first sip, I heard footsteps on the stairs. It was his son-in-law, Jack, with that face of someone who always hopes that someone is working for him. He opened the refrigerator and stood still, with the door wide open. After a while, he blurted out, "Hey, just that food. Where's the beef? And the beers I ordered yesterday?" I looked over the cup, and unhurriedly, I bought what the money gave. Now, wouldn't I? This here has a cost. He frowned. I wasn't sure. He didn't understand right away. What do you mean? It costs. Like I said, this here, it is not a hotel. And from today on, everyone will know how much it costs to stop seeing me as a person. At that moment, Melissa entered. Wow. Still in her pajamas, the baby in her arms. He had heard the conversation halfway. Mom, what's going on? I went to the countertop. Took the papers I had left ready and handed one to her and one to Jack. These are stay contracts. They explain what is my responsibility and what becomes your responsibility. It has symbolic values, yes, but the most important thing is there. My right to say how far I can go, and how far you can no longer pass. The room was muted for the first time since they arrived. Silence weighed more than any pot on the fire. Melissa rayed with her eyebrows arched. Jack shook the paper as if it were a joke. Is this serious? Mother-in-law? Yes, very serious. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Why tell it like this, tearing your chest with elegance? It's not easy, but It is necessary. That morning, no one had breakfast. Not because I didn't offer it, but because their taste was different, and mine, in short, too. But what they did after that showed me that respect sometimes has to be earned twice. First with silence, then firmly, and the next step I took, oh, this one made the whole house shake. The morning was warm. Taxed higher, with a wind that slowly swayed the branches of the maple in front of the house. I had prepared the balcony table carefully, not to serve coffee, like in the old days, but to serve what was left of my dignity, with pen and paper. I placed the folder in the center and arranged the copies of the terms side by side. He had made a point of using new sheets, stapling them with care, leaving space for signature. It was more than a contract. It was a printed limit. I called everyone out, one by one, they left, still sleepy, and barefoot, nay, some with the same clothes as the day before. Melissa came last, crossing her arms already with that face I knew well, that of the daughter who always believed she was right before she even heard it. I want everyone to pay attention. Well, as of today, no, the rules of the house have changed, and I suggest you read it calmly. I distributed the papers. Some laughed before even looking. Wow. Jack read the header and let out a mocking laugh. One of the cousins looked at Melissa, expecting a reaction. Her mother-in-law adjusted her glasses and muttered something like, "Is this serious? Lodging in this house costs $100 a night. Per room, see town, and cost at Waruna. Food. I learned it all. Autonomies. $50 per adult. One dono. 25 per child. No. Tree. Laundry. And a couple. Cheer. Ashitikawa. Power. Nail. Hot water. And use of the kitchen. Water. $20 a day. I spoke calmly. Without changing my tone. How? Looking into each one's eyes. They laughed, knocked, nay, whispered, no, until Melissa slammed her hand on the table. Mom, need I know town? We should cut to here. Stop it. You're acting like a stranger. What a shame. That's ridiculous. I took a deep breath. No, I'm acting like the owner of my house. She was silent now, for the first time. It seemed unanswered. Jack laughed once more, but this time nervously. The children stared, not understanding. The adults looked at each other. Nice. I went up onto a gun. None of them picked up the pen. No one signed. No case intertwined. They were so down, but also now in a car. One is still to see. No one said I was wrong. The silence that settled there was no longer the usual one, the one who ignores me. It was the silence of those who begin to understand that they no longer have control. And, there is a point in life when we stop wanting to be loved, to simply want to be respected. If you stay with me until the end of this story, you will understand why this was the biggest turning point I have ever experienced. No one signed, but no one touched my things that day. No one asked for coffee, nor towels, nor food. And the weight of that paper on the table. It was bigger than any voice on that balcony. But what happened the next night? It was the final test. Because when a woman begins to impose herself, those who have always been in charge react. She was no longer willing to back down. They started acting differently after the meeting on the porch. And it wasn't with respect, it was with tactics. When they saw that the laughter and mockery had no effect, they appealed to what they knew had always worked for me. Guilt. First came Melissa, teary-eyed and trembling in voice, following me around the kitchen like a heavy shadow. Mom, are you okay? Are you sleeping well? This is all so strange. You were always sweet, understanding. Why, now it looks like someone else. I took a deep breath, continued washing my dishes, as if her words ran along with the foam from the sink. Jack, of course, did not miss the chance to enter the theater. He came with the air of a responsible husband. Said, "Ladies, calm down. Are you taking your medicines properly? Because this behavior, I don't know. It worries us." The tone was one of concern, but the eyes were those of someone who wanted to know if there was still time to control me. At lunch, well, no one cooked. Me neither. Each one turned around as best they could. Well, I made my dish. Rice, scrambled eggs, and a chamomile tea. I took it to the garden, sat under the shade of the maple I planted in the first month there, and ate slowly. I heard one of the nephews laugh from inside. One on the chadwam. Grandma has become a rural motel manager. Their laughter went through the glass like a gunshot. But I didn't get up. I didn't retort. No. I took another bite and looked at the horizon as if saying goodbye to the old version of herself. It's curious how some memories seem to be tattooed on our souls. You can change your house, city, even your life. Now, one age, but there are scenes that come back in one piece. And sometimes all it takes is a smell, a phrase, a tone of voice. At that moment, chewing silently, a lunch from many years ago came to mind, when Melissa was 10 years old and called me boring in front of her friends because I asked them to do dishes. I swallowed it quietly too, and I washed the pots with my back wet with tears. What about you? Do you have any memories that come back like this, as if it had happened yesterday? If you do, tell me here in the comments. You can write just a little piece. I lived it. I already felt the same. Or I remembered it now, because sometimes venting is also freeing yourself. Later, when the sun was already lower and the sky began to take on that orange color of late afternoon, Melissa tried another card. No. He found me folding clothes in the room and leaned against the doorframe. She came meek, rehearsed, like someone who read a book of emotional blackmail. How dare? Mom, do you want to end your days alone? Is that what you really want? I looked up slowly. I saw the daughter I raised, the same one I cradled on fever nights, the same one I hugged the day I ended my engagement with my first boyfriend, the same one I got out of credit card debt, and that now I wondered if I wanted to die alone because I decided to respect myself. I answered with a single sentence. Before alone, Lyseron au, then used by those I created. She did not answer. Ah. She stood there for a second. Ah. Then left. Yeah. The house became quieter at the end of the day. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of fear. Their fear. Because they began to understand that I was no longer there to please. And what they did the next day, it was the sign that their war was far from over, but also that my strength, it was far from bending. The next day, more little calm, researcher, Manchester, to little calm. The strategy changed again. The emotional blackmail no longer had an effect. The debauchery lost strength. It was then that they tried the path of negotiation. I was sitting on the porch, reading an old book by Eudora Welty, when Jack appeared with a little smile that already made me sick. He sat in the chair next to him, uninvited, crossed his arms and said, "Wah, Gladys, we talked and thought of a fair way to solve this. We know you're feeling overwhelmed, and we want to help. We can pay you a symbolic amount for the stay. Kind. $200 for the time we stay here. With everyone. What do you think? $200. With 20 people. For almost a week." My eyes took a few seconds to go up from the book to his face. I closed the cover carefully, put the marker, and looked into the eyes of that man who always thought he was too smart. Before I could say anything, Melissa came from the kitchen. "It's just to show that we care, Mom. And look, if you want, we can help you with the tasks too. Jeremy." She pointed to her cousin, who barely knew how to fix a toaster, can even do some maintenance here in the house. Change a light bulb, paint something, in exchange for the food. Of course, everyone wins. I felt my stomach turn. It was as if they were trying to buy me with handouts and impromptu favors. As if my dignity had a price, as if my space, my years of silence and effort, worth a poorly done paint on the wall and a light bulb changed out of obligation. I was silent for a few seconds. I took a deep breath. I got up calmly. You pay more than that just to fill up the car's tank." No one answered. Oh, the phrase fell like a dry bolt in the middle of the room. I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer, grabbed the duct tape and printed contracts. I went to the wall next to the refrigerator, the same corner where I used to leave messages of affection, recipes and notes with love phrases, and started to glue them, one by one. Temporary stay terms, valid for all visitors. Acceptance for permanence is mandatory. I posted it firmly. It was my new message board. Only now, the message was different. I returned to the balcony. I sat in my rocking chair. I sat in my rocking chair. I took the book back. Jack and Melissa were standing there, staring at the wall, as if it were a mirror of their own shame, or of failure itself. Later, I noticed an eerie silence in the air. The children, who had previously run around the house as if it were a park, began to whisper to each other. One of them approached her mother and asked softly, but loud enough for me to hear, "Mom, Mom, are we leaving?" Melissa did not answer. He just lowered his gaze. For the first time since they arrived, the adults had no answer. Mom. They didn't know what to say. They had no control. And little did they know that what would come next was not going to be a proposal. It was going to be a choice, and not everyone would be prepared to do the right thing. In the middle of that mess, disguised as a vacation, when the house seemed more like a campsite than a home, those who least expected it, and perhaps those who needed it the most, appeared. Martha? No. My fence neighbor. Hard, yes, near more Joe. Across the gravel road. Lee, 64 years old. My hair always tied up in a messy bun. Firm hands of someone who plants with love and eyes that see beyond what is shown. I heard the sound of the wooden gate creaking, and then her sweet voice calling from the porch. Gladys, I brought some fresh muffins and some zucchini from the garden. Everything okay there? I went to the door. One little duck's smile. Ah, a tired but sincere smile. Come in, Martha. I really needed some fresh air. She entered, holding a basket. As he passed through the living room, he saw the suitcases scattered, the children lying on the couch, the adults whispering in the corner of the kitchen, as if plotting in secret. The smell of frying mixed with disorder filled the air. The house seemed more cramped with so many bodies. But what really suffocated was the weather. Martha put the muffins on the table, adjusted her skirt with her hands, and looked at me as if asking with her eyes before opening her mouth, "Is something going on?" "No, cha. Where did I sit you?" "Gladys." I took a deep breath. I looked at the room. How? Then at her. No. They came for vacation. Now. So, and they forgot to bring respect. The phrase was in the air for a moment. Martha looked around. Ah, he sat down at the table. Why no? Helped himself to one of his own muffins, and with the same sweetness with which he waters his plants, began to talk to everyone. Wanted you nas you but it was not just any conversation. It was a surgical pruning. Silent, new, elegant. Jack, honey, you brought groceries to share, didn't you? Because 20 people must eat a lot. Jack cleared his throat, scratched the back of his head. Oh, we were going, but there ended up not being time. Martha nodded, as if listening to a child, justifying the bad report card. I got it. And as for energy, laundry, you're helping with the bills, right? Melissa tried to intervene. It's just a visit. Martha? Mom exaggerated the rules a little. Martha smiled. I also have children and grandchildren. How? They know that when they come to my house, they're not guests, they're participants. They help to wash, cook, care, because a mother's house is not a hotel. It is sacred territory. The room fell silent. Even the children lowered their voices. The adults, once so full of themselves, now looked like teenagers caught in the middle of a prank. Martha looked at me with complicity. That exchange of glances said it all. For the first time since it all began, I felt validated. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being cruel. I was just respecting me. It is impressive how the presence of a single sensible person can dismantle an entire wall of arrogance. She didn't scream. He didn't point a finger. But each of her questions was a mirror. And no one likes to see their own reflection when they are acting badly. When Martha left, the basket was empty, but I was filled with courage. Because that day, someone saw me. Not like the boring old woman, not like the mother who complains, but as a woman near her heart, as the owner of her own space. And I knew after that visit, the domino effect would begin, because wounded pride reacts. And the reaction that came that night, it was lower than I could have imagined. It took 2 days after Martha's visit, 2 long days in which silence was denser than conversation. The house no longer had that forced buzz of joy. The children seemed bored. The adults avoided even crossing me in the hallway. And then, at breakfast, as I buttered my bread, I heard the phrase that cut through the air like a razor. Little one, let's go. This has become a battlefield. It was Jack. He didn't even wait for Melissa to sit down. He said that with his mouth full, shoving the coffee down his throat. Melissa, who was still trying to maintain her pose, looked at him scared, as if losing her ally in the middle of the ring. Jack? Wait. It's not that much. It's only until she calms down. But he did not answer. He got up, took the car key, and went upstairs to pack his things. The others began to move too, as if he had given the signal that everyone was waiting for. Paul, the uncle who only opened his mouth to complain about the temperature of the house, murmured, "We'd better go before she calls the police." And that's when I realized that I wouldn't need to do anything else. Their own discomfort drove them out. I just went on with my coffee, chewing slowly. What on? My sin, not turned. In peace. It was as if the whole house breathed differently. Children complained as suitcases were thrown into the trunks of SUVs. One of them even cried, saying she wanted to stay because the house was cool. But even they were not spared from the rush of adults. Drawers slammed. Doors were closed. Blankets forgotten on the porch. The mess of days was now transformed into a hurried exit. Melissa still tried to maintain some dignity. He came to me with a hard face, his eyes carrying more hurt than regret. "It's going to cost you dearly, Mom." I looked at her as someone who looks at an old road that already knows where it ends. What cost me dearly? It was the lack of respect. She held the strap of her bag tightly. "I'm not nearly getting to see what you are," as if it would stop the world from falling. No, but he did not answer. Whoa. He just turned his back, and it was, one by one, the car doors were closing with dry cracks. Tires spun on the dirt of the gravel path, kicking up dust. And for the first time since that phone rang, the house fell silent. A good silence. Alive. Alive. A silence that embraced me. I sat on the porch, my hands still shaking, and closed my eyes for a moment. The wind hit my face, bringing the smell of dry leaves. It was as if the whole house whispered, "Now, now, yes, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe." Like this video and sign up, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Because I know there are a lot of silent Gladys out there. But what happened after their departure? It's what really changed everything. Because sometimes the departure of those who take away your peace make room for the arrival of something that gives you back the world. The next morning, I woke up to the sound I most longed to hear. Nothing. No door slamming. No television on at full volume. No child's scream. No hurried footsteps running through the house as if it were a shopping mall. It was just the wind hitting the windows and the birds outside, as if they were saying good morning to me. I got up without haste. I went downstairs with my slippers dragging on the wooden floor and looked around. Their trail was still there. Crumbs on the couch, finger marks on the walls, a glass forgotten on the highest shelf of the bookshelf. But I didn't rebel. On the contrary, I took the bucket, the gloves, the cloth, and I started cleaning. Only this time, I cleaned it for myself. I changed the sheets in all the rooms. I put the pillows in the sun. I vacuumed the carpets. I washed each bathroom with care, not because I needed it, but because I deserved it. I deserve a clean lighthouse of my own, smelling of lavender and not clutter, while wiping the kitchen with a cloth. I opened the windows and let the air in. The breeze of the field danced with the curtains. The house breathed with me. Every corner that once carried the weight of the invasion was now relieved. And the most curious thing is that the silence did not bother me. For the first time in many years, he was not lonely. It was freedom. After everything was clean, I went to the fridge. I took the eggs, a little bit of cheese, some herbs from the porch garden. I made a simple omelette. I took the checkered tablecloth that was from the old trousseau, spread it on the living room table. I sat and ate looking out the window, where the leaves of the trees were already beginning to die, the field red and gold. Autumn was coming, and with it, a new version of myself. I went to the greenhouse in the back, where my plants were waiting for me. The lavender grew strong. The mint spread a sweet smell in the air. I watered them one by one. Miss Ulicard, the Chantanchekte, talked quietly with them. He said, "Oh, the house is ours again, because it was. Really. It's weird. You know, we spend our whole lives wanting to be heard, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be loved the way we are, and sometimes only after the noise do we understand the value of a clean silence, of a house full of absence, but full of peace. And if you've been here so far, listening to this story with me, I want you to know I haven't told you everything yet, because the most unexpected, it happened days later, and it did not come with shouts, nor with promises. It came with an envelope, yes, a printed name, and a regret that came late. A week later, it was Tuesday, late afternoon. I was sitting on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea in my hands, watching the leaves slowly fall in the yard. The sky was the way only Vermont knows how to do, a mix of pink, gold, and silence. It was at that moment that the phone rang. The display showed the name, Melissa. I looked for a second, unhurried. I took a deep breath, answered, now. The voice on the other end was sweet, too sweet, the kind that we recognize when we've heard it before, but with other goals. Mom, we need to talk. Thinking of going back there, but this time, just me and the kids. No mess. I promise. It will be different. She spoke as if she were offering a gift, as if my life could be adjusted to her return, not the other way around. I was silent for a few seconds, long enough for her to understand that something there was no longer the same as before. Melissa, I understood something in the last few days. Love without respect becomes emotional debt, and I've already gone into too much debt in this life. On the other side, she sighed. He tried to argue. His voice trembled. You're being cruel. This is not a mother's thing. I just want to start over. I closed my eyes. I sipped the last sip of tea. If saying no is cruelty, it's because you've gotten too used to my yes. The silence that came after was long. I almost felt the echo crossing the phone line. So I hung up. No drama. No tears. Weightless. Only with the certainty that some stories no longer need to be repeated. And that same night, something arrived in the mail. A white envelope with her name. And inside, Lynn Ockharn, Bill. Something that would change even the will. You want to know what it was, don't you? Well, then, accompany me to the end, because what came there, it was the last key I needed to turn. I held the envelope in my hands for a good few minutes before opening it. The afternoon light came in through the kitchen window and hit the wood of the table, and I was standing there, with that white paper as if it carried the weight of decades. But it wasn't the contents of the envelope that dismantled me. That's what he symbolized. Because, for the first time, I saw in writing what I spent my life hearing only between the lines. You are here to serve, and there, in bureaucratic words, more. Look at you, came the attempt to reverse everything. A formal request, a rehearsed apology, no, an invitation to reconciliation, but with terms that, deep down, still put me in the role of base, of support, nay, of support. I closed the envelope and put it aside. I got up and went to the closet where I keep my box of memories. I took out a folder with old photos, school tickets, handwritten recipes. I spread everything around the table as someone who organizes a patchwork of his own existence. There were the small faces of my children with fevers in the early hours of the morning, when George was away for work and I spent hours with cold towels on their foreheads, the notebook I used when I learned. On my own, nearly to deal with Melissa's allergic crises. A photo from her 4th birthday, where I had baked a cat-shaped cake because she swore cats understood her secrets. These memories burned and warmed at the same time. Because yes, I loved it deeply, but love was never the problem. The problem was that it was mistaken for an appeal, as if I were electrical energy, always available, invisible. How? Indispensable, and never remembered until the moment it fails. I ran my hand over an old note, written in red pen. Oh, why, Sylvia, did I? Thank you, Mom. You're the best. I remembered the time when Melissa still looked at me with the eyes of a daughter, before the world teaches that mothers are walls that don't come down. Then, they can be ignored. Now, today, no. Looking back, I can separate love from dependence. I understood that gratitude is not born of blood, and that affection that demands constant sacrifice becomes a prison. I don't hold hatred. It was never my style. But I also don't save more space. My home has returned to being my shelter, my temple, my how, my conquest. There, sitting with all those memories, I thought, Leonard City sent, how many women like me are out there, carrying grown children on the backs of their souls? How many confused serving with being loved? I looked out the window. The field breathed calmly. Nature gave me back what had always been mine. Time, silence, identity. And it was then that I spoke out loud, as if sealing a new chapter. Oh no, now, I'm sit so cost, I'm not trying to, as of sealing a fault. I was the ground of many. Today, well, I am the ceiling of my own freedom. But fate, which has a very particular sense of humor, still had one more piece to move. Because the next day, something happened, something that made that envelope completely lose its meaning. Something that to this day, when I remember, gives me that shiver of good surprise. You will understand why. What came in the mail the next day was not a response from Melissa, nor a new attempt at reconciliation. It was an invitation from the local library. They wanted to know if I would accept to run a small book club for ladies in the region. I smiled. No, remembering how many years I lived among shelves and books, silences and stories. I accepted on the spot. And that's how, at the age of 69, I found a piece of me that I didn't even remember existed. Every Wednesday, we meet in the back room of the Woodstock Library. Me, Martha, and 4 other women who, like me, got tired of being the backdrop in the lives of others. Each one brings her tea, her book, her pain. Wow. And there we exchange wisdom like someone who exchanges cookie recipes. Melissa never called again. Oh. And, well, honestly, I don't wait any longer. Jack deleted my number after receiving a copy of the legal term in the mail, the one the lawyer helped me draft. The others also disappeared, and their absence does not matter. On the contrary, it relieves. Today, my home is a place of peace. I receive who I invite. I sleep in my bed with soft pillow and calm dreams. No one else enters with suitcases and demands, only with affection, and only when I want to. I learned in this whole story that love needs to have limits to continue being love, that tiredness is not a sin, and that saying no can be the most beautiful act of self-love. We spend a lifetime giving, and when we stop giving, we find out who was around for affection and who only stayed for convenience. I was ground. Yes, I held the weight of many. But now, I demoise time down my in a ceiling. I cover myself, no leon, protect myself, and shelter myself within the freedom I built with each new choice. If you have accompanied me here, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Telling this story was not easy. It was like revisiting an old house full of drawers that I avoided opening. But to know that someone listened to me, comforts me. And if this story also touched any part of you, help me spread it. Enjoy this video. It's like a warm hug. And subscribe here to the channel, as if accepting the invitation to come back to the next coffee. Tell me in the comments which city you are watching. Why? I love to wonder where the hearts that meet mine come from. And it activates the bell. See? And that way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. And now, mind Sue, breathe with me. Because don't you go yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.